Hey, hello, Internet, and welcome to our third panel here at the Center for the Political Future, and I'm excited about it. It's called How Strong is Trump's Hold on the GOP, the Grand Old Party? I'm Mike Murphy, co-director of the Center here, and we have an esteemed, accomplished Republican panel with one journalistic exception, though I don't actually know how our journalistic panel member votes, as it should be, to talk about this topic. And so let me do some introductions, and then we will get right to it. You can send in questions, and we'd love to handle those at the end of our hour and 15 minutes. Joining us is a recent fellow from the Center here, a spring 2021 fellow, a big hit, a big success, former Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, an old friend of mine from the Republican wars. She was elected to Congress in 2014, served 2 terms representing a tough swing district, the 10th Congressional District. And before that, back when I know her, worked as a strategic advisor to both George W. Bush and Mitt Romney. Welcome, Barbara. Another old friend, Robert George, he's a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, and before that, an editorial writer with both the New York Daily News and the New York Post, 2 of the great newspapers that I enjoy reading, particularly the editorials, of course, Robert, and always the front page wood. He is a conservative and libertarian blogger and pundit who worked for the RNC and Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives. Another former member of Congress, Mark Meadows, who served as the 29th, I believe the last White House Chief of Staff from 2020 to 2021 for President Donald Trump. He was a U.S. representative in the Congress from North Carolina's fighting 11th District from 2013 to 2020. And he was the second chairman elected of the Freedom Caucus in the House Republican Conference. He's currently a senior partner with Conservative Partnership Institute. Thank you, Mark. And then finally, from that hotbed of Republican fanboyism, the New York Times, my friend Jeffrey Peters, who's a national political reporter for the Times and a contributor to MSNBC. He's written about, deeply covered too, really knows the world of this, the last 3 presidential elections, and his coverage is often focused on media, culture, and religion coming together to shape and drive American politics. He has a new book coming out, which a lot of people are interested in reading, called Insurgency, How the Republicans Lost Their Party and Got Everything They Ever Wanted, which is a narrative of kind of the stresses within the party and the evolution that culminated in the presidency of Donald Trump and maybe the future beyond, which is what we're going to talk about. So I'll throw the first question out. I'll start with our 2 members of Congress, Barbara and then Mark. How strong is President Trump's grip on the GOP right now? And will it grow going forward, or will it fade into the rearview mirror? What do we think? Barbara, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, great to be with you. And I would say I do not think the future of either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, for that matter, is going to be old white men. I think you've seen recent polls, both by NBC, but also a poll that Ambassador John Bolton did, showing that the kind of hold, the grip that Trump has is dissipating. And I think that's because, somebody who lost the popular vote twice, was impeached twice, lost the House, lost the Senate, most notably the last 2 people he endorsed, we lost. So that is not the future. And I think even people who may have liked Trump, or the people who liked his policies, but maybe found his personality too toxic, they realize they need to turn the page. And I think that will be, and I don't think he will be running again. I think it's a lot about raising money for a lot of the people around him who are some of whom can't find other jobs. So I think you will see the future of the party is going to be people like Tim Scott, who you saw last night, but also Adam Kinzinger, people like Young Kim of California, who ran way ahead of Donald Trump. Will Hurd, who didn't run again last year, but is I think, a voice that you're going to hear more from. People like Chris Sununu in New Hampshire, who ran double digits ahead of Trump in New Hampshire and won in that state, a state that, of course, Trump lost. I think you're going to see more governors coming out, people like Mayor Suarez of Miami. So we have a deep bench. And even though Trump lost, we won down ballot, and we have policies that win. I think the toxic personality of Trump lost, his lack of empathy on COVID, his, just the attacks, whether it's on minorities or the misogyny, that's what lost. But if you look down ballot, places like Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, we did well, and we have a lot of these future stars that I think are going to, and those will be the brave ones. Now, I'm not saying it's not, if you're in a very red district, yeah, it's easy to be a suck up to one person, but we're not a cult of personality. And the Marjorie Greene mode is a path to Republicans being in a permanent minority. That is not the path to a majority.
Mark, I'll give you a little equal time. You might disagree, but you tell us.
Well, I do disagree, but Barbara is a previous colleague. Obviously, we served together. She was a hard worker when she was working in that swing district, the 10th district of Virginia. Met her a number of times where she was out working parades. So it's not anything other than acknowledging the facts. The facts are everything still revolves around President Donald Trump. His endorsement is probably the most powerful thing that I've seen in politics ever. It continues to be, and even with some of the members of Congress that Barbara pointed out, all of those are in what I would call more marginal swing districts. And so as you look at that, whether it's Adam or Young Kim and their districts, she's picking out districts that really don't represent the vast majority of the 200 plus members of Congress in the Republican Party. The other interesting fact is that Donald Trump got almost 200,000 more votes in Virginia, her home state, in 2020, and yet we still see a loss that Joe Biden
lost by 10% instead of 5% because it turned out somebody more dumb.
Yeah. So if you want to argue the facts, I'll be glad to argue the facts with you, Barbara. I mean, the facts is that he did better with African-American men by 6 points than he did in 2016. He did better than Mitt Romney with the Latino Hispanic vote. And so when you start to reach out, I can tell you, I traveled with him with all kinds of different rallies. And what we found, an interesting statistic, was the people that were showing up, and the reason why he's here to stay, the people that were showing up at these rallies, as much as high teens, 17, 18% of the people that would show up either never voted before or were Democrats showing up. And so he was reaching in on a more populist note to reach those disenfranchised Americans who felt like that Washington, D.C. had forgotten them. And there is, I'll agree, there's a big struggle right now. Washington, D.C. wants to go back to the way that it's always been for the Republican Party. I don't think that that's going to happen. In fact, I would be extremely surprised. And since Barbara is so sure about the president not running again, I can tell you, based on my conversations, if I had to bet, I think not only does he get in, but he gets in and runs in a very aggressive manner.
Oh, we might have made a little news here. Robert, I'm going to let you be the first tiebreaker. If you were, flying saucers landed and put you in complete control of the Republican Party with no dissension, do you make a forward bet on Trump to win back seats, win back the suburbs, win back the White House, or do you retire him permanently and try to move on? What's the smarter move to win seats? Just the raw politics of it.
I mean, I think the smarter move to win seats is less Trump, and I think we have to kind of go. I mean, you understand this. We have to go think of 2022 before we think of 2024, and we have yet to see if Republicans voters turn out when Donald Trump is not on the ballot. We saw that Democrats certainly can turn out when they're inspired or enraged, aroused, whatever words you want to use, to turn out against Donald Trump. We saw that in 2018, and we saw it again in 2020. Now, under normal circumstances, the party that doesn't have the White House, usually ends up picking up seats in the midterms, and so Republicans should be favored to do that in 2022. If Donald Trump, though, is the story, I think the odds of that shrink considerably, because you'll see Democrats that will want to turn out both to support Joe Biden, assuming that what we're seeing so far is going to continue in terms of job development and passing plans that are popular with the American public. If Donald Trump sort of insists on making this about him as much as it is about Joe Biden, I think Republicans are in a very end up being in a very poor position, and that is then going to color what happens in 2024. I'm really glad that Barbara brought up Tim Scott's speech last night, because I think, to use a phrase going back to the 90s, Tim Scott may have actually identified a third way for Republicans to deal with the post-Trump world. Tim Scott neither embraced Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump's name was not mentioned at all in that speech. But at the same time, he didn't take a position like we were talking about Congressman Kinzinger. He didn't take a position of being anti-Trump either, as Kinzinger and Liz Cheney and others have. Instead, he gave a speech which certainly winked at some of the concerns that the Trump supporters have, such as voting integrity, but at the same time he talked about issues. He talked about the fact that Joe Biden had broken his pledge on getting all the schools opened up. He only made one slight reference to the border, even though that's been the big issue that Republicans have been banging the drum on. And I think it was a very successful speech. And I think if Republicans are smart, taking that kind of tone, taking that as a blueprint, as it were, is going to be better than trying to hitch their future support to Donald Trump, who, to answer your question, I don't think will run in 2024.
All right, so Jeremy, you've had your safari clothes on and your pith helmet, going through all the different Republican dense jungles and islands of the different power groups within the party. What's your take on the future question? Trumpy, hybrid, or not, or more of a reversion to the old me?
I think it's Trumpy until Trump decides that he doesn't want to be a part of the conversation anymore. I think you can see that in the way that Republicans, for the most part, there are obvious exceptions like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, but for the most part are really running scared of him. I mean, just look at the way that Nikki Haley has basically discredited herself as a viable Republican presidential candidate. At least that's the sense I get from talking to a lot of Republicans, because she couldn't get her message straight on this. She said at first, I think what was really in her heart, which is that January 6th horrified her, and the way that Trump treated Mike Pence was reprehensible. Then she had to walk that back because she got too much grief from the right, from Trump supporters. And she is kind of, I think it's emblematic of what Republicans are going to have to contend with, what they have been contending with for the last several years, and what they will going into 2024. He is the center of gravity in the Republican Party right now, and remains so, even though he's been deplatformed and defenestrated. I mean, it's really kind of remarkable how, he, on the one hand, his ability to control the news cycle has really been taken away by not having Twitter anymore. But that news cycle, at least on the right, was already so in sync with his issues and the culture war battles that he stoked, that it's almost kind of self-sustaining in its Trumpiness. So he's still very much benefiting from that. And he's now basically been relegated to being just another consumer of conservative media. But that's what he was before he ran for president. And I think that's part of what made him, the person he is today. I mean, he's almost, he and I often see a lot of similarities between, him and Bill O'Reilly, the ultimate Fox News alpha male. But, that's the culture of the Republican Party today, that is dominant as long as I think it was Congresswoman Comstock pointed out, these people show up without him on the ballot. And I think that's the big question. Do they continue to show up? What we can see now, though, is the ones who are running for Congress are making this pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago, where the most important thing that they think they can get right now to put a stamp of approval on their candidacy is the sign off from Donald Trump. And his influence on the party is not just in candidates, but on the issues as well, because these lawmakers in states all over the country right now continue to pass these laws, the underpinning of which is that this election was somehow stolen from him, and that these are laws that he is pleased to see passing. And so they get behind them because this is what state lawmakers know that his voters want. And those voters are the key to re-electing them, at least as far into the future as I can see, which is not very far. But
well, that is a good point. So, we all know that in politics, perception is reality. And for the average Republican elected, particularly federally, the perception has been that Trump is Godzilla in a Republican primary. So therefore, you have to kind of pay him homage or then quietly complain about him if you don't agree. But are we too early? There's not going to be a meaningful mark to market on any of this until next year in the congressional primaries. Trump won't be on the ballot, but he'll probably be out there with his grievance list trying to get even with some people. Shouldn't we wait until then to know what kind of Trump we have? It just strikes to me it's all kind of bluff poker right now, and we're not going to see any cards till the primary season next year in the congressionals. We know what the polling says. The polling says it's asymmetrical. A lot of strength in the Republican Party, though it has been shrinking, not a lot of strength in the general election. So, should somebody just tune out for a year and tune back in for the primaries? Do we think the primaries next year will answer the question with Trump not on the ballot but involved? What reaction do we have to that? Anybody?
Well, look, you already have within the Republican.
I'll get you next, Mark.
Oh, it's like the Republican caucus itself. You had a vote where Matt Gaetz, who I guess we don't talk about anymore, but he told everyone he had more than half the caucus opposing Liz Cheney, and then certainly the president, Donald Trump Jr. and others came out in opposition to Liz. And the silent majority of the caucus, 2/3 of them voted for Liz. And of course, these guys who make a lot of noise get a lot of attention. But the fact is, the people who are out there doing the hard work, the Jamie Herrera Butlers who are passing bills and working together, they're the ones who are going to win their primaries. Adam's going to win his primary. Anthony Gonzalez is going to win his primary. And I think you're going to see the Trump endorsement, according to polls, for one thing, it may be only for half the people, it doesn't matter. For 24% of Republicans, they're saying they're more likely to support the person he opposes. So this is not somebody who can unite. You couldn't unite the country. He can't unite the party. So if you can't unite the party, you can't win a majority or a majority of states. So and I think that's what people are realizing. And even people who even like his toxic personality as well as policies are saying, yeah, I might like it, but I understand I can't win back those swing districts. Yeah, it works in the red districts, but if you can't get those swing districts, you don't have a majority.
Mark?
So to your question, is it too early? I guess I'll share some real time. So while we've been on this call for the last 17, 18 minutes, I've actually gotten 2 text messages, one from one governor candidate, another from a Senate candidate saying, can they have a meeting with President Trump to make sure that they get his endorsement in their primary? So I do think it's a little early. If from a strategist standpoint, it would be very, prudent to wait a little bit before those endorsements actually get rolled out. But I can tell you that it is literally a choose 'em kind of mentality, that you either pick one side or the other. And while Barbara talks about the swing districts that you have to win the majority, I would point to some of the very candidates that she was talking about that won in swing districts with President Trump on the ballot. And I mean, not a single, hold on just a second, Barbara, just a second. So without a doubt, when you look at California and picking up seats there, not a single congressional race was lost, which is unheard of, but not a single congressional race was lost with President Trump on the ballot. And what we have to look at in 2022, it's very different than a presidential year. You have it really put in Texas. Do I think the Republicans will win back the majority? I do. I think that runs obviously through Texas and Florida as we look at a pickup of seats, and as they do the apportionment, it'll run through those two states. But when we look at that, a lot of the congressional districts are getting much more red. And where I do disagree, Anthony Gonzalez is not going to win his primary.
Oh, we're have you guys back in a year on that one. We're find out. We're put a little bet together. The loser has to give.
He'll have plenty of money. He'll have plenty of money, but he won't have plenty of votes.
Well, we will see about that. I'm going to push back a little, Congressman. They've made me take moderator pills here to tranquilize my normal screaming. No,
I love it. I love the kinder, gentler Mike.
Yeah, I'm trying hard here. They got a veterinarian to put me under, But we got to be careful a little bit about the causations. It's kind of the old wet streets cause rain thing, because on one hand, it is true, and I guess you can claim credit on the pro-Trump side, that the House Republicans did better than anybody expected them to do. But the election that had Trump's name on the ballot, at the top of the ballot, still lost. Trump got a lot of votes. Joe Biden broke the meter on votes. So that causation thing, you can kind of spin it either way. Bottom line is, from my point of view, we have not had a lot of legislative victories under the Trump presidency, but then again, we haven't given the Democrats, room to screw up yet in a reelect. So that's why I keep saying it might be a little early.
I would disagree with one thing that you said in terms of legislative victories. I don't know what exactly you're talking about there, because there were a number of legislative.
No, fair point. I meant it in the term legislative.
Oh,
campaigns.
you meant okay.
House, Senate. Yeah. I meant the campaign stuff. On the policy, I hear you. All right, Robert. So here's another a question for you and Jeremy. You can address the last thing we were just talking about, but January 6th, does that stay and ever go away, or will nobody care in a year?
I think. Well, it seems like Republicans want to vanish it down the memory hole, and that seems to be proceeding apace. It seems to have been a permanent marker, though, for Democrats. And frankly, I think appropriately so. I mean, it was a disgrace. And even though it appears that the police officer Sicknick didn't die specifically because of the attack, the truth is several more than several Capitol police officers were injured in the fight, in the insurrection, and it's outrageous, and it's really rather disturbing that that even Republicans on the Hill can't seem to come to an agreement with the Democrats to have an actual bipartisan commission to examine the roots of the insurrection. So right now it seems like Republicans have decided to go to no. I'm ignoring this. But Democrats, I think, are certainly going to raise money raised money off of it, particularly against Republicans who voted to not certify the election. So I think the memory of January 6th is going to go on, is going to continue on, and we heard it in the president's address yesterday as well. So from the White House on down, Democrats are not going to forget January 6th, and Republicans are either going to try to ignore it or obfuscate off of it.
Jeremy, what do you think the origin is of both that thinking? And polls show us, depending on the poll, anywhere from a strong plurality to a majority of rank and file self-identified Republicans believe the election was somewhat fraudulent, not legitimate. They kind of believe that cloud, that it is hard to find impartial people to verify. What is that thought bubble about? Will it stick? And is that the new rules of gravity in the GOP, in your view?
Yeah, I mean, there are polls showing that, Mike. There are also polls showing that a fair number of Republicans, majority, the last one I saw, wrongly believed that there were far left elements like Antifa that were responsible for what happened on January 6th. And I think that to answer your question, really what January 6th has done is to solidify what the culture of the Republican Party has become. And that's entirely a culture of Donald Trump and the reality that he wants to exist rather than the reality that does in fact exist. I mean, I think one of the most extraordinary things about this, to Robert's point about the police officers who were injured, is, you had a mob of Trump supporters attacking law enforcement, beating them, so to the point where one of them suffered a heart attack. And this is the party of law enforcement. It's supposed to be the pro-police party. These are people who are undertaking undeniably anti-cop activity, and there is no recognition of that whatsoever among the president's supporters right now. And I think that just shows not just the way that they will stick their fingers in their ears, close their eyes to the reality, but in some cases are also trying to rewrite the history around what happened that day. And I think you listen to Tucker Carlson, you listen to some of the commentary on what happened to Officer Sicknick, and it's like, oh, see, what the media has been lying to you all along about what really happened on January 6th. It wasn't so bad. And Trump doesn't think it was that bad. He doesn't think that those people were going to do anything to Mike Pence. He doesn't think ultimately that most of them had any type of bad intentions. And I think that if history is any guide here, that's what his voters will continue to believe, because they tend to parrot what he says.
So, Congressman, go ahead, Barbara, and then I've got a question for Mark.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is, because I think January 6th did change everything. And obviously there's a lot of books being written now, both by White House insiders as well as reporters who have, pretty hefty leaking from the White House, including about that day. And I think as more information comes out about that day and the surrounding weeks leading to that again is going to dissipate Trump's impact. And I think it's very important that we do have a 9/11 type commission to find things like, who was Trump calling that day? Why didn't he act faster? We know he sits there and watches TV all day. How could he not have responded to this? And I think something like Officer Fanone's interview the other night on CNN, where he was pushing back on that idea of that nothing happened or this wasn't significant. It was, and having heard firsthand accounts from people who were there, who heard our Capitol Police officers called the N-word by these Trump supporters, and knowing that they were not Antifa people there, and all of these lies that continue to be spread, those are going to get weaker and weaker as time goes on, and that also will undermine Trump long-term.
Mark, as somebody who was there, I'm curious. I think Trump may run again, too. I don't think he's decided. I think he's kind of watching it, and I think he's betting on the Democrats to overreach and have a better chance if he can win a primary to come back. And we saw President Biden. Look, I'm an anti-Trumper, but I'm a conservative, and I saw literally 1.5 times the entire cost of World War II in adjusted real dollars being suggested in spending programs in the last 100 days. If Trump does get the nomination, and the Democrat, either President Biden running for re-election or a front runner like Senator Vice President Harris, will Trump, do you think, have the discipline to run a forward pitch campaign, or will he want to nurse grievances? And that's because that discipline issue, taking my own Trump feelings away, does seem to be a huge question about whether or not he'd be able to run a viable or at least effective campaign in the future. You know him, you know his personality. What do you think he would do? What's your best guess as kind of an expert on observing the guy?
I think probably the biggest thing that is newsworthy is President Trump's willingness right now to look at policy and agendas. Newt Gingrich has been mentioned. There's been a number of conversations with Speaker Gingrich, Lindsey Graham, a few others with President Trump in terms of what are the things that are those disciplined messages going forward. If you were to tell me that a few words on a red hat was going to be what all of America rallied around in 2016, I would have said that's not the case. And yet what we all know that Make America Great on a red hat, stands for one thing, or is certainly the nemesis for some on the left. But it was that focus about America first. I do think that from a policy standpoint, he is fully engaged right now. I know I met with him 2 weeks ago down in South Florida, where we were discussing some of the policy issues. So whether he runs again or not, or whether he is actually just working with someone who does run in 2024, it is going to have really a Donald Trump fingerprint on it. I know, Barbara, that's like nails on a chalkboard to her, and yet I can say that without a doubt, there's no way that you can travel all over this country and go from place to place and have the organic support for President Trump and deny that it's authentic. And so as long as and the key point to your question is, so as long as it continues to be about what makes America great and the priorities for the American people, I think that it's not only a successful message, but it's one that will resonate. Last night, you and I both heard this was all about big government last night. I mean, I could not believe the $4 to $6 trillion, depending on how you count it, that was really about doing it from cradle to grave in terms of government intervention. It's not what conservatives are about. It's not what anybody on the panel would suggest that has worked long term. And yet doing the contrast between Joe Biden and Donald Trump would be difficult if you don't keep that focus.
Mike, Jeremy, you recently, I think, spoke with him. I'd love your take on that. Will it be a grievance fest, or could he have an effective 2.0 learn from his mistakes campaign if he is the nominee in 2024?
I mean, I think Donald Trump knows how to do one thing, and that's how to divide people. And that's going to be what he does if he runs again. It works. It almost worked for him this last time. I mean, let's not forget, what was it, 40,000 votes in a handful of states that decided the Electoral College? I mean, yes, Biden won a massive popular vote victory, but this was still a close race in a lot of places.
Yeah,
and we don't know.
42,918 votes.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, though I gotta say, as a political hack, that is a trick number either way, because there's a Mondale version of that with 99,007 votes, because you never can redistribute them. But anyway, point is, they both got a ton of votes. So
yeah, absolutely.
And the Republican nomination, I think, will be worth having in 4 years if the Biden guys, for their own ideological reasons, I'm not going to give the conservative lecture on that here, But if they make the big taxing and spending bet and put the party there, and the progressives are most of the energy and become the brand, having that R after your name will be worth a lot. And Trump has we can argue about how much, but he's got a shot at that. I'm just curious if Trump is the atomic clock of Trump and he can't change, and he'll be ranting about Fred Upton and, voting to impeach him and 10 traitors, or would there be do you think you spoke to him recently, as Mark did, which would let me shut up. What's your take?
No, I think you're exactly right. I have to be a little careful about what I say. I don't want to spoil what's going to be in the book. And I also don't want to
you're a
shred the
capitalist.
embargo.
I don't blame you.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a good point, because I think that speaks also to your question of whether or not he runs. I don't think there's any way that any of us here can know that. I think Mark and I, being the two people who have spoken to him most recently, would both tell you that he's still very upset about the election. And regardless of whether or not he went into this believing that the election could be stolen from him, he believes that now. But that's what he thinks. And he's very angry about it. And he blames a lot of Republicans for that, for not standing up for him, including his own former vice president. That's someone whose political future and who's, what his standing right now in the party, what that says about the culture of the party. I think that's a fascinating subject, probably for an entire panel discussion in and of itself. But I think the election were held tomorrow, Trump would absolutely run. The problem is it's not tomorrow, and a lot can happen in the next few years.
Robert, if he go ahead and then I have a follow-up for you.
Well, no, you go ahead, and then I'll incorporate both.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, in your position as the aliens made you the all-powerful head of the party, and Trump doesn't run, who do you think in the current crop, because there are probably, the 150 Republicans who dream of running for president right now in elected office, but of the ones you see out moving around, the Kristi Noems, the Governor DeSantis down in Florida, obviously Nikki Haley, who's extremely ambitious, Marco Rubio, who I don't think has lost his map in New Hampshire, et cetera, et cetera. Who do you think are most likely to bubble to the top? Who do you think the three are in a world with Trump maybe influence, but no Trump candidacy?
Well, if there is no, if Trump is sort of, the wizard in the background and is not actually out there himself, it's not surprising that Governor DeSantis is getting a lot of attention right now, and kind of deservedly so too, because as friends of mine in New York, a good friend of mine in New York, earlier this year, basically in January, she and her husband took the kids and moved down to Florida for 4 months because she wanted her kids in school. In school, and she said, it's 2019 in Florida in terms of no lockdowns and people kind of going about their business. And so Ron DeSantis's handling of the pandemic is different than, say, Governor Whitmer or Governor, let's not going to talk about Cuomo, but DeSantis is seen as somebody who is effective, is a governor. Republicans like governors because of executive experience. So definitely look at him. I think I've thought this for a while, but particularly based on his response to Biden's address, I think Tim Scott is going to be getting a lot of attention, because I think there is a fact that as much as conservatives dismiss progressives as saying, well, they call everybody racist, I think there's a deep desire in the conservative movement and amongst the party broadly, from even in its most conservative corners, is to be seen not as racist. And I think Tim Scott is somebody that a large segment of the party could get behind, because I think the most important line that he gave in that address was, America is not a racist country. And if you go on Twitter and other social media, the hair on fire coming from the left in response to that was kind of telling, and that statement, even among Democrats, people who love the country don't want, even if they see episodes like Derek Chauvin and George Floyd and so forth, there is a desire in a large segment of this country to see those as anomalies, not just as business as usual. So Tim Scott, running both as a conservative Black Republican, but also using this line that America is not a racist country. In a sense, it sounds almost like Obama 2008, where Obama runs as running as a patriotic liberal who says, only in a country like America is my story able to be true. And so I think Tim Scott is not a rah-rah kind of a candidate, but I think he's somebody who you may, after a boring Biden presidency, Republicans might want to run a boring candidate who just happens to be African American.
Yeah, I thought he busted a few pretty good Republican primary moves last night speaking to both audiences at once. Barbara, I'll let you do your list, including who will be the great hope for us never Trumpers if somebody might engage Trump in a primary. Who do you?
I'm glad you didn't say great white hope, Mike.
Pardon?
I'm glad you didn't say great white hope.
Oh no, I get in enough trouble around USC to begin with. I'm not going to get 100 miles from that. Are you kidding? All right, go ahead, Barbara.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's, as we all know, it's a lifetime until the next election. Certainly in 1988, nobody was forecasting Bill Clinton. So I think but I do think one thing I'll say is that it's going to be a woman or a man who stands on their own feet and is not on their knees for Donald Trump. And I think people want to see that you have your own ideas, your own accomplishments. And that's why I think, governors, mayors, people who are out there working on sort of those kitchen table issues that have always been successful for Republicans, but also highlighting a lot of the problems with the Biden agenda. I think one of the problems with fixating on Trump all the time is Republicans aren't talking about a lot of the problems, as you've mentioned, the tax rates that, in the past, Obama, Chuck Schumer, lots of Democrats said were way too high and confiscatory. So we need to start talking about issues again. I think the men and women who, stand up and just say, I'm going to fight for you. I'm not dealing with all this, who's going to get asked to the prom by Donald Trump. And I think people want to see strength and resolve in working for them, not somebody who's kowtowing to some kind of cult figure.
Mark, if Trump doesn't run, who do you think the movement conservatives, Freedom Caucus, some of the more populist Trump supporters, you don't have to name one, but who do you think make the first bracket of the current people? We're doing wild guessing now, but it's fun. That's what we do.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, Governor DeSantis is at the top of that list. He was a previous Freedom Caucus guy, was one of our founding members, now doing an outstanding as governor in Florida. And it's really about the policies, as Barbara was talking about. It's really the way that he's governed in Florida that's moved him to the top. And he's become a remarkable top tier candidate if that's going to be the case. I happen to, even before last night's speech, be a big fan of Tim Scott. Actually, he's worked very closely with President Trump. We worked together while I was at the White House on his police reform bill. He's a very thoughtful guy and very funny too. I mean, what people don't realize, they saw the serious side of Tim Scott last night. Not only is he funny and smart and intelligent and comes across in a genuine way, but he actually cares about people. I get that. My district was right next to one of his best friends, Trey Gowdy's district in North Carolina, so I got to know Tim very well. So I think Tim, not just, in fact, not because of last night, but because of what he's done since he's come to serve in the Senate. I think he's a top tier candidate. And then if you look beyond that, and Barbara's right, we're a long ways out. I can say that to your point, Nikki Haley hurt herself where she was she was against Donald Trump until the backlash was unbelievable, and then she was for Donald Trump. And Nikki Haley really hurt herself, where I would say she would have been probably the odds-on favorite early on. But the jury's still out. You got some great senators. I do believe that what you're also going to find, though, is the Donald Trump discussion will actually be a litmus test. Either you're against him or you're with him in some shape, form, or fashion. The very fact that we're talking about this right now and that he's been out of office lets us know that we're going to be talking about it for a long time to come. The support of, in California, your USC, people don't realize over 6 million people in the state of California voted for Donald Trump. Now, he still lost by a large number, but the state that gave Donald Trump the most votes out of all 50 states was California. And when you look at that, you can't help but understand that there's going to be this interview process, so to speak, whether President Trump runs or not.
Jeremy, what do you think? You've been out becoming an expert on Republicanology, as you've kind of looked at the history of the party in the last 20 years. If not Trump, who do you think, at least at this early stage, is sending the right kind of harmonies and notes out in the Republican world that could be interesting? Obviously, Tim Scott, I think, helped himself last night. You have Josh Hawley. There's something going on in Arkansas. Tom Cotton, you got no shortage of people there who have been, they must have gone by Hope and had a little of that magic ambition water there, because they're both making moves. Who do you see, at least in the first inning here, kind of warming up with the bat in a way that would resonate with the party you think we now are, if there's no Trump running?
Yeah, I agree with everything that everybody has said on the viability of all of these folks. And Josh Hawley,
spoken like a true RNC chair. I think I found your next job. But go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite the next move I'm making to look. But I'll keep. I'm still pretty young, so I'll keep that in mind. But I was going to mention Josh Hawley, Mike, because I think that he is somebody who, and this will probably surprise a lot of the folks who are not Republicans who are tuned into this call, but to the point we were making earlier about what January 6th revealed about the culture of the Republican Party, I don't think Josh Hawley hurt himself in the slightest with Republican primary voters, or with at least a majority of Republican primary voters, by what he did on January 6th. And I think you combine that, so he has these Trump credentials because of the January 6th issue. You also have, I think, one of the most serious attempts to create kind of an intellectual agenda around Trumpism. And what Hawley's done is to go after big tech as a monopoly and to try to break up big tech and to turn them into this boogeyman. And I think that works for a lot of people, because I think there are an awful lot of questions about why these companies have so much power and why we don't know the types of data that they have on us and what they can do with it and why that hasn't been restricted by Congress. It's interesting to watch him. So I think he's been laying low. I also might think that your good friend Marco Rubio is somebody to watch as well, because he's also been trying to do something with Trumpism that strips out the nativism aspect there. I know Rubio and his people feel like what they can do, or what they would like to try to do, is to be the face of this multi-ethnic working class Republican coalition, because they look at what happened in Florida, a state that Trump pretty comfortably won by Florida standards, and they see that it passed a minimum wage increase by something like 60+%. 60+% of the population there supported it while also voting for Trump. So there is, again, it would be a big break with the type of policies that Rubio has supported himself as a senator, and that many Republicans have supported. Not very free market, not very conservative economically speaking, but I think that's a direction that some of these guys are looking to go in, and it is consistent to some degree with Trumpism.
Mm-hmm. Well, is that a permanent change? Because look, many decades ago, I was sitting there at the Georgetown Foreign Service School getting yelled at in Russian by a Soviet Air Force defector. And my plan was to go off into the national security world and fight the evil empire when I wasn't working in the college Republicans. And what I liked was the free market, free trade, fiscal policy that wasn't built on deficits and borrowed money, and kind of small L liberal democratic values, and marched off to join the Republican Party from a Democratic family in Detroit, and loved it, and was in those battles for a long time. But I woke up 4 years ago, and now we're feuding with the Atlantic Alliance that kept the peace under President Trump since 1945. We're spending like drunken sailors, although I'll give it to Biden. He's blown even that away. We went into hibernation on the fiscal stuff. And the free trade thing is now like out in the Republican Party. We now sound more like Biden did last night. So is that permanent? Is the old model gone? And we're the populist party from now on, and we don't care that much about deficits, and we're more isolationist? Or is that the great battle we're going to have? And anybody who wants to address it.
If I could
I'd like to hear Mark Meadows answer this at some point.
Let's let Robert take a
shot,
guy. And then Mark, unless he has some Zoom connection trouble here in a minute, we'll throw it to him and Barbara, who actually had to vote on some of this stuff.
Right. I'll just quickly jump in, and I think it's just very interesting that the two consecutive presidents that have decided to spend most like drunken sailors are both teetotalers. So that may tell you something. That may tell you that we need more politicians that drink.
We need a new analogy. Yeah.
we need a new analogy. But I thought Jeremy's point about what Marco Rubio is trying to do, and also pairing that with what Josh Hawley is doing. Now, it ended up backfiring because of what happened down in Alabama, but Rubio was encouraging unionization at Amazon because Amazon was becoming was representative of one of these big tech woke companies, and so Rubio says, yes, let's support the union. In a similar fashion, Josh Hawley is one of the leading people to be supportive of regulating big tech. We're starting to also get murmurs of Republicans who want to use the tax power against businesses that in a sense don't play ball. I mean, Hawley and Ted Cruz and at least one other senator are looking at getting rid of baseball's antitrust exemption. So I think as part of this populist move, you will start seeing Republicans moving away from even the part of their party of being anti-regulation, low taxes, or using the tax power to punish their enemies, as Democrats have done in the past. I think that may very well be part of the transition of the party away from being from free market to a populist conservatism.
But back to your point, Mike, of the, listening.
I know it's hard. You get us confused.
Right,
we're interchangeable. Yeah.
And their initials are the same too.
Yeah. But look at how if you want to listen to the people, look how the people who work at Amazon voted. Republicans used to believe in elections and people voting with their feet. And so let's pay attention to how people voted. I think, Republicans should acknowledge that Trump lost and why he lost. Let's stop, that whole stop the steal, big lie thing. And then let's get back to issues. And one of the things that Tim Scott, people like Mayor Suarez, people like Young Kim, what they're focusing on is opportunity, workforce development, good conservative principles that I think go kind of get us back, not into that old Republican, because we're 21st century. We have a different economy. The post-pandemic economy is going to be very different. People are not going to go back and work in their office 9 to 5 the way unions or Democrats may want us to. People are going to work flexibly. They're going to have a hybrid. We've figured out we can be very productive. For certainly a lot of professionals can, but for a lot of people, there's going to be a new normal. And I think the politicians who capture it, embrace it, and listen to what people want, that's who's going to win. And that isn't, anything to do with personalities. That's people listening to their constituents, listening to their voters, and seeing and getting out there, going to your businesses, going to, your constituents, and seeing what their lives are like and how can you improve their lives. And that's where a voice like Tim Scott and a lot of these people, like mayors, kind of get that. And Mayor Suarez is asking tech companies to come to Miami. He wants to roll out the red carpet because he realizes those are good, high-paying jobs that'll bring a lot of tax revenue into the area. And then he can lower taxes on people like our friend Jeb Bush did in Florida for years.
Mark, on this question of, are we a populist party now? Is the old free trader Atlantic Alliance stuff gone, or it's going to be a fight in the future? What's your take on just the ideological side beyond the personality grip Donald Trump might have?
Yeah, I think it's a hybrid, and there are two kinds of people in Washington, D.C. that like to spend money, Democrats and Republicans. And if you just remember that, I mean, that's sadly, we can all, pound our chests and say, we're going to be fiscally restrained in the way that we legislate. But the fact of the matter is, in the privacy of a lot of those rooms, it's both sides that are agreeing to these unbelievable spending bills. Having been in the room to see how the sausage is made, it's very obvious that that's what's happened. But to your point, I do think that we'll continue to hit a free trade aspect of that. A number of us that are more typical three-stool conservatives, when you look at it, it's whether it's tariffs, whether it's the way that we look at our national security and national defense. Those are ways that continue to be a hybrid. And it may have been Robert that said, it's a populist conservative movement. You mentioned Josh Hawley. The very fact is he was one of the few people that was calling for a stimulus check of $2,000 per person on a more populist. So here's a conservative senator saying that we need to spend $2,000 going against what many would characterize as the more conservative steering committee senators in their conference. And yet, what do we know at the end of the day? $2,000 per adult actually did get done. So if you look at it, it was $600 under Donald Trump. But the reason it was $1,400 under Joe Biden is because it started with $2,000 with President Trump, and it just carried through. And so that populist side of it will continue to do there. My concern still remains the deficit and where we go with that. I do. Big tech is actually changing a few things. You got guys like me who believe that limited government is the best kind of government. And yet what we see with the Googles and the Facebooks and the Twitters and their control, their de facto monopoly on the news that we consume, whether it's from the New York Times or anybody else, they can affect the news feed that people get to see. It's very troubling for a guy like me who says, I want to go totally free market, let it go, let it be the Wild Wild West, to a point now where I'm saying they need to be broken up. And that's a transformation that has happened in the last 4 to 6 years. So when we see that, I think it'll be a hybrid of the two. I do think that some of the policies, you can't argue with the economic success of the pre-COVID term of the Trump administration. I mean, we saw wages go up, we saw unemployment go down, and that was across the board, not just for one select group of workers.
So last question before we go to Q&A, and if you're out there with questions, send them in, because we're going to quarter after or so, and we want to be able to address as many as possible. But quickly, I think the odds are the Republicans will recapture the House as long as we stop talking about space lasers. If that happens, Biden's got a pretty narrow a window to try to get his agenda done, and he's swinging big. But, do we think anything will get done, or it'll be just brute force reconciliation bills, starting with this infrastructure plan where there seems to be some steam building under the direction of Senator Manchin, who I think holds most of the cards to, land about halfway there, focus more on concrete? Or is that a pipe dream and they're going to force through what they can and we'll be back into a campaign season in 8 or 9 months? Anybody?
Yeah, I think on the infrastructure side of that, Mike, the reason why Manchin holds all the cards, and it's not just him, it's a few of the other senators on the Democrat side of the aisle, Sinema in Arizona, but it doesn't just stop with the two of them. Listen, when we talk about an infrastructure bill that's this big, the vast majority of that money doesn't go to a number of these states that these senators represent. It doesn't go to Arizona. It doesn't go to West Virginia. When you look at it, the vast majority of it goes to 6 to maybe 7 metropolitan areas. You're looking at Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. And when you look at that, it becomes very difficult for a Joe Manchin to say, I'm willing to sign up for a $2 trillion infrastructure package that, by the way, he and his constituents will not see during his term as a senator because it takes too long to actually get in the pipeline. I'm not optimistic that there will be a huge bipartisan deal because I do believe the Democrats will overreach and continue to think that there is a blank check to be filled in.
Barbara, what do you think as a legislator? And then we'll move on to questions unless anybody else has a point on this.
Well, I do, we've been talking a lot about Tim Scott, but I do think his racial justice issues, he's working well with Democrats, and I think they have a path to get a bill there. I think a smaller infrastructure plan that Republicans are trying to work on is possible. And then I think you're going to see Democrats from states like New York and New Jersey. Already Senator Menendez is talking about, hey, whoa, stop it with these high tax rates. That's going to kill us. Because when you look at who voted for Joe Biden, it was a lot of people with very high incomes. And so, Steve Bannon wanted to raise the top rate. When they came to our caucus the beginning January 17th, they were like, hey, this would be cool. We can stick it to New York and Californians and all these rich people by raising the top rate. Republicans are like, wait a minute, we didn't run on raising taxes. So I think if Democrats start sticking it to their own voters like that, that's 2 income professionals in very expensive metropolitan areas where they're going to have members that are going to have problems. So I think that may get curbed too. So then you're going to have to curb the spending. And actually that may help Biden because the less he raises taxes, the better the Democrats, are going to do. So in a way, Republicans have to fight the good fight to not, I voted for the tax bill. I am a standard Republican who wants to see, there's good, opportunity, lower taxes and what we did there. And I don't want to see that reversed. But I think there's bipartisan agreement there, certainly on the capital gains tax, the same thing, because it's not just what it is here. We're competing internationally. And if you care about competition, and actually I work in the tech sector, but I say, you care about competition, you don't want China beating us on taxes, please stop talking about breaking them up and making our tech sector weak when China is trying to beat us. And let's stop, as Republicans, shouldn't be punishing success. So I mean, I'm optimistic that, because we're already targeting women and minority candidates Republicans who can win in these tough swing districts. And I think if the Democrats overreach like they did in 20, then that will put a lot of our candidates in better shape.
Okay, let's go to the questions here. You can still send one in. We're trying to fit it in. They're flying in. Here's a question from Alex Michelson, our friend who's going to be hosting the next panel on the 2022 elections, which you should see. We have a real great bunch of experts there. Alex wants to know, and we're going to try to get through a couple of these, so we'll be quick. Is there actual political incentive for bipartisan compromise with Biden? Should the GOP be worried about compromising and giving him a win politically? Real quick, why don't we start with Robert, then go to Jeremy, and then if either of our former members want to chime in.
I think it's pretty clear right now that Republicans don't see any political incentive to compromise with this administration, and conversely, I don't think that the Democrats see any Republicans coming their way. So that's why right now the debate is with Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and a couple of others. So yeah, I will be very skeptical if there's going to be any bipartisan deal over the next few months.
Jeremy, what do you think?
I think that's a good point. I think the question is, so who does that hurt more? And it looks like, I mean, history will tell us it's going to hurt the party in power more. But I think that the biggest issue there is how much Democrats are defined by the elements in their party that are shouting, no compromise, no compromise, no compromise. Republicans are Satan, and Biden for even considering inviting Susan Collins into his office. That's an act of heresy. I think there is a real risk. And I read this very interesting interview that I would suggest, if you guys haven't read it, the other day on Vox by James Carville, who talked about this and what a problem it's going to be for the Democratic Party in 2022 as they keep getting defined by the noisiest, most far left elements in their party. Now, a lot of that is disingenuous right-wing media caricature of the Democratic Party, but Biden has not shown a real willingness to stand up to these ideas like defund the police that are just incredibly unpopular, but those have come to be what has defined many voters' understanding of Democratic policies on law enforcement. And I think, it's a real concern for a lot of Democrats that I've talked to, because they recognize that there is one political party in this last election that got whiter and more elite, and that's the Democratic Party. And that's a big problem.
Interesting point. Go ahead, Barbara.
I was to say, Bill Clinton, when he he went too far left, lost the House, and then triangulated and won in 96. If Biden triangulates now, before he loses the House, it actually probably would help him both hold the House. I mean, that may not be possible, but depending on what our candidate recruitment and how much we allow Trump to pollute it happens. But I think triangulation is why Biden won. He kind of split the baby. And if he moves to the left, it's going to hurt him. So, I mean, far left. So if he stays more in the middle and triangulates, not something that we've really seen yet, I think that will probably help him as well as Democrats in getting reelected.
Yeah, I don't see that happening, just because 2022 is upon us and there will be primaries Democrat primaries that will actually have challenges from the left, and it's going to keep the agenda going left. It's why Joe Biden is where he is right now. And so if anything, I think it gets worse. James Carville is right. So there's a bipartisan agreement in that I think he is right. There's no way to win with that, because at the end of the day, the far left is going to continue to take the Democrat Party that way, and senators and House members are fearful of those primaries, and AOC has a lot to do with that.
Okay, next question. This is from the questioner best known as Anonymous.
Yeah.
Young conservatives clearly exist, but you wouldn't know it looking at many universities around the country where a small minority of extreme liberals bully and antagonize conservatives. What should liberals, and especially extreme liberals, know about Trump supporters to help encourage empathy and respectful dialogue on our university campuses? And let me footnote that I think here at USC, we make a real effort not to have that cancel culture, which is why we invite people from every side of the spectrum. And we have for about 2 years, and we're proud of that here. We're a very tolerant university for interesting points of view. But now, this is an easy layup to any conservative who's tired of this stuff. So let's make it quick, because I want to get one more question, but who wants to take that one? Nobody?
Well, who's the youngest here? We're not, I have kids who are in that age grade. I said, no, I mean, I think, having been teaching a little bit over the past few years and seeing people who are young conservatives, there are a lot of really sharp young conservatives, again, who want to turn the page and kind of have a different approach. I think certainly, we have been losing young voters, and that's a problem. So again, that's why I think we need new faces who can kind of combine and weave together a lot of these things and leave personality politics aside.
Last question, again from Anonymous, a lot of anonymity here. Congressional districts have become increasingly homogeneous over the decades. Most districts are won by 10 or more percentage points, and at least a third are won by 50 or more percentage points. The primaries are where the action seems to be. This seems contrary to GOP values on competitiveness and opposing monopolies. Do you support open primaries or requiring nonpartisan redistricting? These seem like Republican issues, but Dems are taking the lead on them. What are we missing here? And I'll quickly say, hell yes, the more the primary electorate looks like the wider election free market, I think the better it is. I think it's better for both parties, but generally in my experience, people in the system now have mastered it and are not unhappy with the idea of being in a safe district. So you can be for AOC or Trump, because you only have to deal with your primary voters. But anyway, anybody else?
That's really interesting.
Because we got some interest here, real quick. Robert first, but quickly.
Very quick. I would say no to open primaries, because I think the party should have the option of choosing the candidates that they want. But I do think that having nonpartisan redistricting would ultimately be better, because you're going to have more compact districts, and you're not going to be in a situation where the politicians are selecting the voters.
But the whole country at large is becoming more diverse. So I think after redistricting, you can only redistrict so much when you have a more diverse country. So I think everyone after redistricting is going to see all of their districts are going to be a little bit more purple. And so I think, my district was very diverse and very, was purple and to blue, but I think that is what more people are going to see. And I think that is good, because then people have to talk to people other than themselves, and they have to talk to a wider variety of people. And I think a lot of people who may not realize that's what's going on in their districts, their states, are going to see that. North Carolina is seeing a lot of what is happening in Virginia. So is Florida. Georgia is certainly a perfect example of that, in Arizona. So I think it is good that it's going to happen no matter redistricting. So I think people focus too much on the redistricting. We are an increasingly diverse country. If you go in and look in any kindergarten in any district, you can see the future. And that is where, if you want to have a political future, you need to be talking to those parents of those children in kindergarten.
Look, the question and how it applies to each political party, I think, is kind of fascinating, right? Because Mike, I mean, I don't need to tell you, you worked for the guy in 2016 whose whole thing was, I'm going to be the candidate who's willing to lose the primary and win the general. And
we did.
And you did. And in the Democratic Party this time around, 2020, you had the guy win who said, basically, I'm going to be the one who can win the general. I'm not so worried about the Democratic primary electorate, or said that in a way that wasn't quite as direct as I'm wording it here. But so that is the fact that played out for the Democrats and not for Republicans. I wonder if you see a reversal of that next time,
Yes.
or not.
Well, what we're seeing now is both primary elections and candidates who tend to be successful in them look at general elections as just a bigger primary. And so that is the incentive set now. And we're seeing, if you look at the demographic tables, although there's some good news in the Latino community for Republicans, I think that is a dumb bet for us. But anyway, we're out of time. So I want to do the thank yous. I want to start by saying, what a good looking panel. I'm embarrassed here. I was late, so I just threw on a blazer and I look like a nightclub magician. So you are sartorially an excellent panel, and thank you for your insights. I want to thank Jeremy. When's your book coming out?
It's coming out the first week of January 2022. So it always had a good title. We just didn't know how on the nose it was going to be, the title being Insurgency. So January release is good timing.
Excellent. We'll be back and do something with that. Robert, they can catch up with you on Bloomberg Opinion. Thank you so much. Barbara, thank you very much for being here and being such an excellent fellow. And finally, Mark, even though the drugs are wearing off and I'm about to go on a Trump the criminal rant, I want to thank you for showing up for what was an away game. Thank you very much for contributing and being part of this.
My pleasure. It was great to join you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Now we're going to the next panel with Alex Michelson, super pollster Mark Mellman, and many others to talk about what the heck is likely to happen next year in the critical election. So we hope you enjoy our final panel. Bob Shrum?